Good evening, Pururu and friends. Today I would like to present my article entitled From Global Trends to Local Context, Language Dilemmas in the ELT Classroom. The article was taken from Hall 2011, Exploring English Language Teaching. We go out to the outline first. My presentation will be discussed about the contextual factors that are likely to affect English language classroom and the variety of English that is taught in any given ELT environment. And the next is about the key debates surrounding the growth of English in the world. And then it's also discussed about the real or authentic English in the language classroom. And the last is about learners' specific language needs affect the type of English taught and learned, and the dilemmas raises for ELT professional. So we go first to the introductions, the word beyond the classroom. There are three theories here. The first from Stern 1983, language teaching is an enterprise, a set of activities in the society. Pennycook 2000 stated that classrooms, both in themselves and in their relationship to the world beyond their walls, are complex social and cultural spaces. And the last is Auerbach 1995, the day-to-day decision that practitioners make inside the classroom both shape and are shaped by the social order outside the classroom. So in the classroom, language teaching is also depends on the social situation or on the social and cultural spaces. The inventory of contextual factors in language teaching. This is the model introduced by Stern 1983. As you can see, the circle in the middle is about the language teaching. It's also affected by the school environment and also affected by home environment and neighborhood, also affected by the region, and at the last also affected by national and international setting. From its surrounding, it's also affected by educational, economic and technological, linguistic, geographic, socio-cultural, and the last is about historical and political factors. So there are some issues that may affect teaching, learning, and the L2 classroom proposed by Stern 1983. As I mentioned before it, from the model, we know that there are many factors that affected in language teaching in the classroom. So the first one is the linguistic factors. For example, the extent to which English may already be used within the learner's local, regional or national community, as in Singapore. Socio-cultural factors, for example, the perceived economic, political and cultural status of English. And the next is about historical or political factors. For example, the policy shift toward or away from teaching English based on attitudes toward the British Empire. The next one is about the geographical factors. For example, the Central and South American learners may tend toward general American English norms. The next is about the economic and technological development. For example, English may be seen as important for economic development. And the last is about the educational factors. For example, the age at which children start to go to school. As we know that in Indonesia, the policy is when children around 7 can go to school in elementary school. It will be different in another country. That's called educational factors. The next is thinking about English. What might teacher teach and learners learn? What English language teacher teach and learners learn is a more complex question. Why complex questions? We know that so many dilemmas in there. As we Dawson in 1992 stated that what to begin with is this English language we teach. How is the subject to be defined? Its implication has an direct implication by the global trends, national and institutional policies and values, and individual learners' needs, and also belief and reasons for learnings. So when we are asked to answer what to begin with, is this English language we teach, we have to be considered about the global trends, national institutional policies, individual needs, belief, and reason for learning. It can be complex one. We face the condition such changing English word Englishes, and it becomes the dilemmas for the ELT classroom. So as we know that English is spoken almost by 2 billion people around the world and in almost every country of the world, even in Indonesia, even in Saudi Arabia, or even in the African countries, everybody speaking English. And there are different roles of English. As we know that there are three kind of roles of English, three contexts of English. English speaks by the first speaker or L1 speaker, L2 speaker, and the other context. For example, in as a foreign language like in Indonesia, as you can see from the diagram here, the L1 speaker is around 330 million. The L2 speaker of English is around 430, but the major or the most occurrence, the bigger portion of speaker is from the other context of English. It's around 1 billion. So in the classroom, which variety will we teach? So as we know from our slide before, there are three different rules of English, and then in the classroom, which variety will we teach to our student? So it is not a simple answer, but we have to know traditionally the question of which English to teach focus on the perceived competition between British and US English, and the fewer L1 English speaker than L2 and English speaker from other contexts around the world. English increasingly used as lingua franca or ELF between non-native speakers who do not share an L1, rather than primarily for communication with native speaker of English. The assumption that British or not American English is the natural variety of English language teachers and learners to focus upon is potentially problematic, or at least open to be reviewed. So this is the situation right now that we face. So which variety will we teach is not a simple question. So Willis in Jenkins 2005 offers 6 possibilities for ELT in lingua franca context. So we can teach standard British English, or define a form of international English and teach that, or offer a range of Englishes in the classroom, offer successful L2 speaker of English as models, or give learners exposure to largely native speaker English but place a very low premium on conformity, or the last we can choose, include the study of language and dialect in a language teaching program. So there are 6 possibilities for ELT in the lingua franca context. We go back to the question, which variety will we teach in the classroom? The debate surrounding English and Englishes, the notion of acceptable lingua franca language features, the extent to which non-native varieties and variation should be recognized within the ELT classroom. It implies on the notions of Englishes and ELF lingua franca, therefore require ELT professional to consider whose usage we are to take as the model for language learners to aspire. So it implies, so which model of English might be most appropriate for language learners. So we have discussed about the debates, we have discussed about the linguist franca language features, and the extent to which non-native varieties and variations, but we now have a conclusion that we have to look back to the usage and the model for language learners to aspire to. So which model of English may be most appropriate for language learners? So I will be like to underline the word appropriate model. Appropriate for learning. What is the appropriate one? Language descriptions, real English, and ELT. To teach genuine or artificial language content in the class. To teach corpus-based language descriptions tends to assert native speaker norms in ESL and EFL context, second language or lingua franca context, and it implies on focus specifically on questions of pedagogical effectiveness and appropriateness, addressing those issues specific to teaching and learning resources. So what is appropriate one? From many kind of varieties, from many kind of contexts, we have to be focused specifically on question of pedagogical effectiveness and appropriateness. So we have to underline the word effectiveness and appropriateness for pedagogical purpose. We go to the other discussion here. So the word real English, what and why. So the real English itself can be stated as authentic tests and tasks. It is argued through open more realistic models of language use and leave learners better prepared for life outside the classroom. Corporate studies show that actual language use is often quite different to the language feature recorded in the standard grammar of English, and that naturally occurring spoken language includes many features not dealt with in grammars or English language textbooks. It is essential for learners of English to learn from actual examples that can be trusted because they have been used in real communications. Question and concerns. The whole point of language learning tasks is that they are specially contrived for learning. They do not have replicate or even simulate what goes on in normal use of language. Language in fact cases to be authentic when removed from its original context, as learners cannot possibly understand it in the same ways as its original users. Learners are, by their very nature, outsiders to the original discourse community and to the actual communicative purpose for which the language was used. So, language itself, the authentic itself can be changed from the authenticity by its context. If it is, if the context surrounding the authenticity is lost, the authenticity might be lost. The ways ahead. So corpus-based description of English and real language clearly have important implications for language teachers and teaching. The real English is true up open in ELT classrooms will depend upon a number of contextual factors, including the extent to which learners, teachers, and other ELT professionals, for example the textbooks and materials writers, regard authentic language as both the aims of for learning and relevant to classroom life. The learner's social context, their reason for learning, and the relationship between real English and local Englishes, and the availability of relevant resources ranging from, for example, the textbook based around real English to call facilities through which learners may be able to explore corpus data themselves. English and learners need specific English for specific purpose, which learners need to develop their overall linguistic competence in English, or whether they might focus in particular on learning the language and skill necessary to meet a specific need or to fulfill a particular role. In effect, learning English for a specific purpose, or ESP. ESP class can thus look very different in different environments. And ESP thus provide a further perspective of the English that teacher might teach and learners might learn. The language taught is determined primarily by teacher needs that can be identified and specified to a much greater degree. And English that is taught and learned in ESP context is essentially genre based. Specific English for specific purpose have the dilemmas also. The extent to which ESP classes should include elements of general English and aims to develop learners' broader linguistic competence, whether ESP requires a basic level of language competence, for example intermediate competence, before learners can make satisfactory progress in a complex and specialist language. How far teacher are teaching language and how far work-related non-linguistic content. There are two of the dilemmas of specific English for specific purpose proposed by Robinson. So we are going to the summary of our discussions today. English blah 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 and values in ELT. The issue we have examined are subject to first debate among applied linguistics teachers and learners, and there are clearly no simple answer to these challenging questions. So because there is no simple answers, the summary will be English blah blah blah, not direct quote English as A or English as B, but there are still no simple answer to these challenging questions. We have to decide by our professional view and look for the pedagogical appropriateness and effectiveness. A variety of global and local contextual factors may affect decision about what variety of English might or should be taught and learners in any particular ELT environment. This is extremely clear when exploring the relative prestige of varieties of English. For example, standard British English compared to English as a lingua franca. It also an important consideration when reviewing the apparent pragmatism and neutrality of much ESP and CLIL teaching, which from a critical perspective accommodates a status quo view of the word. So the word status quo here, when we don't have the right answer of these challenging questions, we can use ESP maybe or CLIL to accommodate our view to teach English in the classroom. So that's all for my presentations today. Thank you for watching. See you.